What was your first phone? Story 1. Fisher-Price Chatterphone. It had wheels and you could pull it. When it moved, the eyes would look left and right. Probably 1970. It was made of wood and had an orange handset. Story 2. Pretty sure it was called my first phone. It was a string with a plastic cup attached to each end. Story 3. I got to have one of those see-through corded ones with all the gears in my room, but I'm guessing you mean cell phone? In which case, I saved up and bought myself a LG chocolate in cherry red, first phone that was truly mine. Story 4. Probably a GE or maybe a Western Electric. Pick up the receiver to check that nobody was online, give the crank a hearty spin. Operator answered, and you told her who you wanted to call and she'd make the connection. When someone was calling us, we'd count the rings. 2 in a short ring meant someone was calling us. Story 5. It was red, and it had a cord that was a bunch of coils, and it plugged into the wall. The keypad wasn't even on the same part of the phone as the speaker and microphone, and if I wasn't home, my mom would answer a similar phone in the living room and take a message. Story 6. The first phone I bought myself was a rotary dial beige princess phone with a cord. Ma Bell had recently been broken up, and as part of the anti-monopoly arrangement, we could now buy our own phones and didn't have to pay a monthly rent surcharge on our phone bill forever. The Ma Bell phones lasted forever, though, and the one I bought died in 5 or 7 years, I forget which. Story 7. My first phone. Radio Shack bag phone. It was a huge improvement over my brother's suitcase phone, and you weren't tied to your car. I thought I was the chute. Story 8. It was an LG model flip phone in 2005 or so. It was pretty cheap, and my dad also got the absolute worst calling texting plan possible, where I had like 10 minutes a month and 1 text message a day. When I complained about how little that was, I got an earful about gratitude, and then treated to a lovely closing remark about how I didn't have any friends, so I didn't need a cell phone plan with a darn. He may as well have not given me a phone at all. Story 9. Motorola Razr was the first one I ever walked into a singular store and bought my own plan and phone with my own money. Rip Singular. Story 10. A party line in the 1960s. I had a mobile phone a couple of years ago, but dropped it in the parking lot and ruined it, and said, "No more of these." I have a house phone now. Story 11. A flip phone. No idea which one, though. May have been Nokia. But I do know they came in pink and white, and me and my sister both had one, although I can't remember who had what color. I loved to play the games on it, but was terrified to go on the internet, because it was expensive for the prepaid. Story 12. Way after my first phone, but I loved my G2. It was the pimped-out sidekick, but we had pagers back then. Story 13. Nokia 3310. Basically, a tank with a keypad. I'm convinced it could survive a nuclear blast, outlive humanity, and still have 75 battery left. It didn't just make calls, it made statements. Story 14. Mobile. Motorola V120. Landline. My mother had one of those 1800s models where you lift the receiver and hold it to your ear and speak into the mic, which was vertically mounted, and the cords are fabric covered. It was an antique in the 1980s, but it worked. I think you had to tell the operator what number you wanted dialed. They eventually put a stop to people using that, and you had to have either a rotary dial or a keypad. We never had a rotary phone. My grandmother did. It was awesome. We went straight to the old 80s style translucent phone with the neon lights in it. Dumb as hell, but it was cool for the first 5 minutes of ownership. Never had a phone in my bedroom, never was that popular, but I did buy a Forest Hunter green phone, the kind with the buttons on the handset and the receiver that's just a bit bigger that you set the handset down onto. I may have the terms a bit off. I remember visually more than technically. Story 15. My first phone, and the one I'm still using, Ron Vivo. It's basically a hand-me-down phone from my grandma. This thing's like 15 years old, but works just fine. Story 16. The old Nokia brick phone. Dropped it off a tractor out of a second-story window, and it didn't miss a beat. Yes, back tractor tire rolled over it. Story 17. Samsung Beat was the first, then an iPhone 5C 8 then a Galaxy S7 Edge when it first came out, then a Galaxy S9 Plus, then a Galaxy S20, and now I'm using a S21, and I'll probably keep buying them until I have a reason to upgrade. Story 18. Nokia 3510i. My parents had a divorce and my mom wanted me to be able to contact them. I might have had a phone before that, but I'm not sure. Was very excited to be able to play Snake. Edit. It was covered in stickers. Edit 2. It was blue on the front, white on the back, and it had an orange piece in between. I thought it was so cool. Story 19. My house first phone was rotary phone. Now I presume OP means cell phone. It was Ericsson T28, but the whole house shared it. The Nokia 2300 was technically first and would spend hours on Snake Game. Story 20. A BlackBerry that was handed down because my uncle got a new work phone. Honestly, if they brought it back, I would get it. Story 21. My first cell phone was a Nokia 2110, and I loved that thing. It was nigh unbreakable and just so cool. I got it in the mid-90s and used it up until I saw The Matrix and upgraded Nokia 8110 and wraparound sunglasses. Total nerd cool. Story 22. Technically a Siemens A55. That was my first fully functional phone of my own, but before that I got my dad's old Nokia 5110 when he got a Nokia 3310. I couldn't call with that though, but could receive calls. Story 23. Technically, my first phone was a rotary stuck to the wall by the kitchen. My first mobile phone was a BlackBerry flip phone that I received back in middle school. Story 24. Siemens M35, bright yellow rubber thing in 2000. I think it was waterproof. It was definitely drop-proof. Followed by a Nokia 8210, so tiny and you could change the color of the front. Loved that phone, huh? Story 25. A landline lol. Memorized all my friends' house phone numbers. Cell phone? IDK, what it was called, but it was black and blue and slid open long ways to reveal a keyboard. Story 26. Samsung Galaxy S3. I had PADM from Star Wars as my background. Fast forward to 2025, I have a Samsung Galaxy A41, and PADM is still on my background. Story 27. It was brown and hung from the wall. I think the cord let me move around like 8 feet. Sometimes one of the curls would bend around the wrong way, and it infuriated me. Story 28. Play school with a face and 2 eyeballs that moved as I dragged it across the floor with the attached string. Story 29. Rotary hardline desk phone. Opaque plastic so you could see the guts. Had green and red lights that would flash on rings. Story 30. As in first one that I used in my household. An old cord phone that I could be 3 feet away from LOL first cell phone was a pay-as-you-go Nokia brick. That thing was indestructible. Story 31. Nokia 3310. But the first one I remember really wanting and loved was Sony Ericsson K800i. That 3.2 MP camera was banging back in the day. Story 32. A Nokia 5110, bought from Singular Wireless in April 2000 at the mall. I had just turned 18, so I was out looking for any cell phone I could get at a decent price. Verizon wanted a deposit since I had no credit, but Singular didn't, so I went with them. This was my favorite phone. I had like 20 different faceplates and button pads to customize it. I miss it, but don't miss paying for texts and ringtones. LOLA. Story 33. Motorola flip phone. I went on the water rides with it, and it still worked. And it lasted me 2 to 3 years until the screen stopped working. Story 34. ATT trimline push button, W backlight in light blue. I then went through a couple Panasonic cordless phones until 1992, and my first cell phone, an Oki 900. Story 35. My first phone was, I think, an LG flip phone bought at Walmart. I was on the monthly 15 Straight Talk prepaid phone plan, which sucked because I got only 60 minutes talk time per prepaid phone card, and that was it. My current smartphone is Samsung, but I'm now on a total wireless prepaid phone plan that has unlimited take and text for $31 per month, which I like. Story 36. A 4-family party line and a rotary analog phone. You had to pick the phone up and listen to see if a neighbor was using the line. If not, you could make your call. Story 37. It was one of those old Nokia phones when cell phones first got popular. For those too young to remember, you used to have a credit check before you could get a cell phone. Back then, there were roaming charges. That meant you were outside the network, but they would connect to another carrier. You can still get service, but you would have to pay a roaming charge. Back then, cell phones were used for talking, and that was it. Nothing more. Story 38. A cordless black VTech phone. If you mean personal cell phone, then it was a black and silver Motorola Razr V3. Story 39. Was a dumb phone from Samsung. I had it when I graduated middle school, and afterwards, when graduating high school, I bought an LG G5 with my pocket money. Story 40. In my youth, we didn't have phones. We just used smoke signals to send important messages like, "Dear lady, our small community of bachelors would appreciate enormously if you could provide us picture of your bare ankles. Thanks in advance, and may God be with you." Story 41. A Nokia 3310 that I picked up off of the road after a car drove over it, put a different SIM in it, and continued to use it. Story 42. Motorola M3788, very basic. Did everything a phone needed to do, but not much else. Replaced it with a Siemens C35i, which felt space-age in comparison. Story 43. Qualcomm QCP 2700. It went for a swim in the Delaware River. The screen stopped working, but I had memorized the number of clicks while scrolling through contacts to call who I needed. Finally died about 4 months after. Story 44. No idea, but I had my own phone line in the 90s, so I can connect to the internet on dial-up without using the house phone line. Story 45. My dad's hand-me-down Siemens phone with no camera, a crappy screen, and actual buttons. And he insisted on calling the company Simons because he's stupid. Story 46. Motorola Razr, it was like the thinniest phone of the moment. I was feeling super cool in my class with it, LOL. Story 47. It was attached to the wall. It was brown, and it made a loud sound when someone would make it scream. Story 48. Nokia 3220. It had 4 rubber bumpers that lit up, and it had a cool Nokia splash screen. It also had great ringtones that the lights were synced to. Story 49. Sony Ericsson T610 built-in joystick with an add-on remote-controlled SUV that could be recharged by the phone itself. Still the GOAT. Story 50. It was a Boost mobile pay card type phone that you had to buy cards to get minutes, but it was also free walkie-talkie to other same type phones. Always had some trucker blowing up my phone. Story 51. Nokia 5190 with LA Cellular. Shortly after it got sucked up by ATT Wireless or Singular, I don't clearly remember, but it got me out of my 2-year commitment and I got into another cellular plan phone. I got into progressively smaller and smaller phones until they were made fun of in the movie Zoolander. And BAM was using a Treo. Story 52. My first phone was the legendary Nokia 3310 Indestructible, had Snake and probably still has battery left somewhere. Story 53. Nokia 6150 UK, and only when I was 17, wasn't allowed one prior. Every other kid at school had the exact same gray 3210. 6150 was superior technologically in every way, even if looking back wasn't as sleek as the 3210. I thought at the time it even looked so much better, perhaps more professional or businesslike. Story 54. The Windows Phone. After that, it was an iPhone 5, 7, X13. If you go all the way back, it was whatever my mom and dad had plugged into the wall in the 70s. Story 55. Nokia 2112. I've set my iPhone ringtone to the old Nokia ringtone for the nostalgia. It blows my mind that younger people don't get it and just say, "Oh, it's the Jurassic Park ringtone." No, it's not. Like, it is, but I didn't know that before. Story 56. A Motorola. Back then, no one cared for the model number as much. It looked somewhat like eTax A130 when I just Googled it. Good times. Story 57. This silver Kyocera phone with blue buttons on it. That phone was the GOAT. Never forget the $1,500 bill I racked up via text messages XDD. Story 58. Motorola brick. I see people saying a Nokia brick, but if you've ever seen the Motorola brick phone, you'd call the Nokia a candy bar. The Nokia is tiny by comparison and came out way later. I think I had 4 different phones after the Motorola before the Nokia 5110 came out, an Emerson flip that I particularly dislike. Story 59. I don't remember the exact model. I just know it was a HTC Windows mobile-based phone. Edit did some Googling, was def one of the HTC Touch Pro models. Story 60. Motorola Pocket Classic, an analog, non-brick micro-tack style thing, had an LED display that could only display 7 characters, when mobile numbers were already 10 characters long. So you'd type in someone's number, and the start of it would disappear off the end of the display. After that, I had a Ericsson GA6228, changeable faceplates, and a Nokia 3210, no aerial, a Panasonic GD75, polyphonic, Sony Ericsson T1630, color screen, little jelly bean, and then the sexiest thing ever, a Motorola SLVR L7. After that, iPhones. Story 61. Nokia something. I only needed to charge once every 2 weeks or so. When I first got a smartphone, I was shocked I had to charge it every single day. Thought that was so darn inconvenient compared to the Nokia. Story 62. I don't remember what it was called. Want to say a Motorola of some sort. But it was a small gray flip phone. Didn't have a camera on the front, but on the inside lid it did. Story 63. Nokia 232 in wood grain. Was badass. Got it when I was 18. Couldn't afford to really use it, got 60 minutes a month for 40, but I got it for special reasons. Story 64. The LG VX10 flip phone or something very similar. This was in 2001. My dad owned a Motorola Microtac in the 90s. Story 65. A Sagem something or other, then a Nokia 3210, a 3310, and then a Motorola something or other, and then a Motorola Razr before smartphones. I think the Razr is still in a drawer somewhere. Story 66. A rotary phone. I also got an old payphone from the 50s in my den. Pain in the rear dialing them numbers these days. Story 67. It was green and probably made of Bakelite. It had a big green dial on the front. I dislike it because whenever the radio announcer offered a prize to the fifth caller, it always went to the people with the fancy schmancy push-button phones who could call the radio station much faster than I could dial. My parents were unsympathetic and never replaced that phone with a push-button one. Story 68. It was either a Nokia or a Motorola, I don't remember which I had first. And I certainly don't remember the model, this was like 25 years ago, LOL. Story 69. Flip phone back in 2012 or 13. My parents wanted to see if I was mature enough first before I got an iPhone. Honestly, I loved that flip phone. It was so simple, and I still have it actually. Edit. Mainly just keep it as a token of the past. Not my main phone, LOL. Story 70. I don't remember the model, but a Nokia that could, as most Nokias, not be broken. I have seen it get driven over by an wheel loader carrying an 2.5-ton cement tube, and it didn't even turn off. Story 71. A huge Motorola one with an aerial you had to put up before you could answer it. I think approximately one person ever called me. Story 72. Mine was a Kyocera Oyster. Lovely little flip phone with a pearlescent white casing, perfect for a freshly 16-year-old me. I had shared a Shoot Nokia phone with my sisters before that, but the Oyster was the first that was actually mine. Story 73. LG G Flex 2. Then I got a Pixel, then my best friend gave me her old iPhone 5S, and I fell in love with it. Story 74. Alcatel Max with a screw in Arial. 2 years later, my sis got a color screen Nokia as her first phone. I was so jealous. Story 75. Sony Ericsson T610. Loved that phone. We had a bug with our local network provider where MMS were 0 rated and therefore weren't charged for, so we'd message each other with just text in an MMS at a time when not many people had MMS capability on their phones. Story 76. Motorola bag phone back in the day, man. I was so super cool taking calls on that massive handset from my ute. Story 77. An obnoxiously green box on the wall. It came with a handy cord, useful for strangling your siblings when they were making too much noise while you were trying to talk to your friend. Story 78. I had an iPhone 6S during the time the iPhone X was releasing. I still remember all the memes of it being 1000 and the algebra jokes. Story 79. Sagem RC812. All the buttons started wearing off pretty much immediately, so after a month or two I returned it and swapped to a Philips Savvy. The most amazing feature with the Sagem was you couldn't SMS someone from your contacts, and you had to type the message before entering the number. So if I wanted to message someone and I couldn't reply, keeping in mind there's only space for 10 messages on the SIM card, so I always deleted messages, I had to look up the number, commit it to memory, create a new message, type it in by pushing dozens of numbers, then type the number and hope I had. Remembered it, right? Story 80. Samsung Galaxy Young was my first Android. Before that, I used Nokia N73, a Symbian beast, sexy camera, and music controls. Having this phone in that era was the coolest thing. I was the popular kid in the block. I also used Nokia N95 for a good while. Was an amazing phone, great camera, jumbo speakers on the side, and played Asphalt on it a lot. Story 81. AudioVox GSM 810E. Loved this tiny little indestructible beast. Got it when I was doing military service in '99, and it took a beating that only a Nokia 3310 had a remote chance of surviving. Still have it somewhere at home. Story 82. I had a very cute Sony Ericsson where you could make your own pixel background. I made a Hamtaro wallpaper LOL 25 or so years ago. Story 83. Sony Ericsson flip phone. I remember collecting the different phone charms, and I was obsessed with the games on it. Story 84. Analog Motorola StarTAC. I loved that phone. I felt like a crew member on the Starship Enterprise when I used it. Only phone I cried over when it could not be used anymore, as analog was discontinued. Story 85. I'm pretty sure it was a Sony Ericsson K700i, which I lost to a group of pickpocket thieves at a public transportation. Sag. Story 86. Used an iPod until a few years ago, where I got an iPhone 10. Have a 16 now because the screen broke. All of my phones, except for this one, have been hand-me-downs because I'm broke, and my family dislike that I keep not wanting to buy an expensive phone and shoot. Story 87. Was called a Firefly. Looked like a blue pill with a mom button, a dad button, and a button in the side that called 911 if you held it down for like 10 seconds or something. I remember around that time Gushers was doing a sweepstakes where someone could win a Firefly phone LOL. Definitely a phone meant for kids in the early mid-2000s. In 4th grade, I started staying home alone for a few hours after school, so my parents got me a Firefly phone. Every day after school, as soon as I got home, I had to call both of them with my new phone. Story 88. Aside from the old black rotary phone on the side table when I grew up, my first cell phone was an NTT Docomo I bought in Japan sometime around 1993 or 1994. Japan was way ahead of anywhere else in the world. I was already browsing the internet on my phone by '99. Story 89. I made my first phone when I was 11 or 12. It was a small cardboard box with a hole cut in the top. Sticking out of the hole was an Echo Dot connected to a portable charger inside the box. Story 90. Nokia Lumia 521. Funny, I was jealous of my friends because they had iPhones, but they were jealous of me because I had a flat brick of a phone that didn't even have Snapchat. But I do remember Twitter and especially Instagram beta on that phone, and yo, that she was goated far. Story 91. Year was 1999. Phone Philips TCD 128BD BT phone that needed topping up at 10 a time, and you got a 20 min phone call for that credit. My phone had a hacked chip that if you powered it down and turned it on again, it topped itself up. Got about 4 months out of it before it was cancelled. Story 92. My first personal phone was, I think, called Motorola 360. It was a thick flip phone. That was when we had to pay per minute. There was no unlimited in the 90s. Story 93. A Philips Savvy, 1997. Texting hurt my thumbs because the buttons were too hard to push. Got my first job soon after and jumped on the Nokia train. Story 94. Mitsubishi M3423, or at least it looked like my first phone. I remember it was a Mitsubishi, but I never knew its name before searching it for this question. Story 95. Siemens C10D. I got it in 1998. Before that, I made a wooden phone in a wood working class at school. My granddad had one of those big, heavy things with a wired handset that came in the 1980s. I think it was made by Motorola. He had mounted it to a set of rails between the seats in truck. It is still in storage in Grandma's garage. It was seen as high technology at the time he bought it. Most people in my area did not even get landline phones before the early 1980s. Story 96. Oh man, the Nokia phone with the fluffy fake fur padding on the inside of the leather case. I was 17 and kept it in my glove box for emergencies. It was my mom's old phone before she got a flip phone. Being able to text someone in your pocket by button feel was crazy later on. Story 97. The Nokia 3510i. Pretty sure it's still in a cupboard somewhere. My 10-year-old self loved the blue and orange design. Story 98. Nokia 1610 hand-me-down from my dad. 2 years later, when I got my first paycheck, I bought a Nokia 3310. Story 99. I was a young kid and shared it with my brothers, but it was a BlackBerry of some sort, with a keyboard that could slide out. Story 100. Samsung TE066 Black, a little flip phone I had for work. One tough little bastard. I abused the hell out of that thing and it just kept going. I upgraded only because the button stopped.